assumed he was trying to do that.
Hello there, welcome to the F1 Weekend Debrief, where Rob Smedley, the sun is out, summer is here, and Mercedes still class of the field. Why is that?
They're doing a better job than anybody else. Quite simply, they are, as you put it, the class of the field. You know, they're doing everything right. They've got the best car at the minute. But it's not just about that. It's about that you know, what Toto talks about all the time, that close-knit team, you know, building that team spirit, relying on each other. And they're getting that bit right as well. You know, it's fantastic. They've had 5 1-2s out of 5.
5 1-2s.
You know, that's history in the making that we're seeing there. And I can remember, you know, being at Ferrari in the early 2000s, mid 2000s when we were dominating, and eventually somebody's going to come along and they're going to break all of those records. And that's what's happening now. You know, if I had a hat on, I'd take it off to them.
Yep, no indeed. And before we get into our mission control, Rob, you went trackside at Barcelona to find out a little bit more.
We've got a very exclusive and rare opportunity to get incredibly close to the cars here in Barcelona. And Formula One's technical consultant, Rob Smedley, has brought us out to Turn 1. Rob, why have you chosen Turn 1?
It's a really important corner for lap time. It's kind of the start, where it's the start of the lap. You've got to get into a rhythm, and if you can get that right, then the rest of the circuit can flow. You know, it's a difficult one for front tyre temperatures. It won't be today, but it can be. And it's just so technically important. It's technically important to you know, you're late braking down from about 320 kilometers an hour. You're carrying a lot of speed into the apex, and if you can get the car hooked up and sat on top of that apex, sat on top of that curb, and fire it off into turn 2 before you flick into the left-hander, you know, you're going to get a good sector 1.
Who have you noticed that's getting it right, and who's getting it wrong, and what do those two differences look like?
Well, the two different. I mean, you got to have a trained eye first of all.
That's why I brought you down here, Rob.
But you know, the differences are quite small, and it's just about how much curb they'll take in turn 1. It's about how late they'll brake, how much speed they'll carry in. I mean, I've just been watching Kimi. Kimi's been carrying an enormous amount of speed, but again, the Ferraris, you know, you can tell that Ferrari is a fantastic car. The Red Bull as well. The Red Bull sits very high on top of the curb and fires itself off before it goes off into turn 2. The Mercedes, again, that's a great car. You know, it turns in very, very well. It's very, very stable. And you know, there's all these upgrades that have been coming, and the more downforce that you add, the more you know, this becomes an easier section.
We've come up above turns 1 and 2, and Rob, what can we see and tell about the car's performance from up here?
What we're really looking for is, we talked about the car on the entry to turn 1 and getting on top of that curb. We're now looking at the other side of that and what the change of direction's like in the 2. I mean, what I can say is that, you know, the Mercedes on, you know, in that turn 1 late apex change of direction, it's really, really good. You can see it's not quite as agile. It's on the medium tyres, so it means it's got plenty of fuel in as well. But it's really good all the way through that complex. The Ferrari, I would say, if you look at the Ferrari, it's not quite as quick getting into the apex of turn 1, but then the change of direction is really good. Change of direction is very, very sharp, very, very crisp. They're going back on the power at that point. So, you know, another good car.
We're at the inside of turn 12 now. And Rob, what are the challenges here for the drivers?
It's really one of the most challenging parts of the track. It really is. You come out of turn 10 and you get on the exit curb of turn 10. You've usually got the rear tyres pretty hot at that point because of the traction. You come through 11. There's a little kink here at 11, but the real challenge is 12. It's one of the most difficult corners of this track, without a doubt. And the key is that you've got to brake and you've got to turn in at the same time. So you've got to carry speed while you're standing on the brake pedal and slow it down to the apex. And in that part, you need massive stability from the rear, because you need to be able to get the car turned in, carry that speed, but it not step out on you. And more or less, most of the cars that I'm looking at here, they're all stepping out a tiny bit. And then what the tendency is, once you go back on the power, you get back on the power, and then it's trying to push you out wide. So you see a lot of drivers kicking up dust just as they put a wheel across onto the gravel on the exit of turn 12. It's a really, really difficult technical corner, and this corner really rewards a good car. I remember, you know, we're going back into ancient history now, but Red Bull was one of the first, you know, when they started to really come on with their chassis development in you know, the late 2000s, you know, 2009, 2010, and they had like a mega car. We were doing all of our competitor analysis at Ferrari, and they just killed us around here, absolutely killed us. because that car had everything. And it was kind of how people started to design modern Formula One cars, thinking about aerodynamic balance when you're designing the aerodynamics, and not just, you know, how much downforce you can get on it, but where you want the downforce in what part of the corner. And if you can get it, you know, so that you've got really, really good stability on that initial turn in, just like that car there, and that one, even though he's on an in-lap, and then a front that hooks up from the apex out, then you'll have a good car around here.
Yeah, good stuff. Nice one, Rob. So from Barcelona, we're back at Biggin Hill and Formula One's remote operations centre. So, of course, Valtteri Bottas, he was on pole position, just like in China, but it was Hamilton who got the jump at the start and went on to win the Spanish Grand Prix. Let's have a look at it from the helicopter. It was a difficult one for Bottas, wasn't it? Because he seemed to get a better start than in China, but still he was threatened from the right for Hamilton and the left for Vettel.
Yeah, he didn't get the, you know, it was the first few metres, and then you can see him getting down into turn one here. He gets a little bit squeezed. You know, he cedes to Lewis. He's got the better line there. And again, he's had a big moment of oversteer there. I think he's done a good job, to be honest. You know, it's just that first few metres that he hasn't been able to make stick.
All right, so he spoke about a problem with the clutch, a feeling with the clutch he hadn't had before. But this isn't, if we have a look at it from the 360-degree camera on the nose, this isn't Hamilton being strong the way he promised that he would be after Baku. No.
No, I think this is, if you look at it, you know, and we'll analyse this in a little bit. You see that Valtteri really, you know, he doesn't get a great start. He's getting squeezed, as we saw from the overhead camera there. You know, he's made a better turn one certainly than Sebastian has. And you know, when we look at it in a little bit more detail, that we will in a little bit, you're going to see that it's just those first few metres. You know, the first 5 metres, the first 10 metres of any start make a huge difference. And once you carry that deficit all the way up a straight, especially a long one like Barcelona, very, very difficult to make that back.
All right, well, before we look at that, just tell us about how you interpreted the positioning of the two Mercedes, given the fact that it's an important race. You know, they can't crash into each other. They've got these rules of engagement, but Hamilton positions his car perfectly for the inside line.
Yeah, he does, and I think, you know, he might not even be slightly ahead then, but he's definitely got the inside line, and Valtteri's done the right thing, by the team. He's done the right thing by himself as well, in that he ceded to Lewis and, you know, and let him go, and then tucked him behind him.
All right, let's have a look at the side-by-side comparison. And as always with these things, you know, we talk in the past about Hamilton working on his starts, working with his start engineer on getting it right. If we have a look at it in full speed, there's not much to it, actually, is there?
It's very nuanced.
Yeah.
It's very, very nuanced, to be honest, and it always is. You're never going to be looking at huge differences. You know, I think that when you slow it down into 10% speed or whatever that we're looking at here,
yep.
Both drivers in what we call the weight phase, they're 25 and 26% throttle, so they're both doing almost exactly the same thing. And you can see that Lewis is able to feed that throttling progressively. You know, Lewis is now up at 30 kph, and look at him, he starts to feed that throttling. Valtteri, on the other hand, he's having to wait, and you know, it's just that first 5 metres that we talked about, whether it's wheel spin, whether it's bogging the engine down.
Yeah.
You don't get the jump, and there you go. You know, Lewis is feeding it all the way in, progressively up to 100%. He'll get to 100% much earlier than what Valtteri did. But the important thing here that you've got to look at is the speed differential.
Yeah.
You know, he's constantly about 10 kph behind him.
All right, what else from the start? Vettel's lock-up. What did you make of that? Obviously compromised him, as we'll discover later on in the first stint, but did that lose him much? The race, potentially?
Yes, definitely. I think that's a key moment, 100%, in that he's locked up that right front. You know, he's been desperate there, as they all are, to get past Valtteri, and even then get on terms with Lewis going into 2 and 3. And in doing that, he's had to brake very late into turn 1. And when you brake late and you've got a little bit of roll on the car, it's very easy to lock up that right front, especially on cold tyres. And in doing that, he's flat spotted it, and that's definitely compromised that first stint.
Quite a bit of a flat spot front right.
Copy it.
Yeah, well, let's pick up on Charles Leclerc and Ferrari, really, and look at why they weren't able to challenge for the win in Barcelona. We saw Sebastian Vettel's lock-up at the start, and that led to this team radio message a few laps later.
And let Charles by. You can go by now on this main straight. And now look for me for pitting as soon as you can. Even in traffic, I don't care. Better than these tires.
Okay, copy. We are on it.
What about some of these strategy calls? Is there a inertia in the system where we might be watching, you might be watching at home and thinking, oh, they should definitely do that. They're obviously thinking the same thing on the pit wall, but are they then having a discussion about it between Iñaki Rueda, the strategist, and Mattia Binotto and Jock Clear in the garage? And is there a bit of an inertia in actually making a decision?
There's always a little bit of inertia. It's very easy to sit at home and see one aspect of it and then, be shouting at the television. There's usually, more things to be taken into account and more opinions. And, a clever team will have, a reduced amount of inertia, let's say. We'll have very direct communications to be able to get them decisions made.
Okay, what about Sebastian Vettel then and the fight with Max Verstappen? What might have saved him? We've got our strategy masterclass whiteboard we'll come to in a second. But if we have a look at the race trace, Max Verstappen in the blue, Red Bull, Sebastian Vettel solid red, and Charles Leclerc dotted red in the Ferraris. Now, what are we looking at here, and how might a Ferrari played it differently?
Well, I think the key points, is definitely that first stint. So as you said, we've got Sebastian, who's the solid red line. And you can see that his pace just isn't very good. He's got a flat-spotted front right tyre. And, if you look at Max, that solid blue line, all the way up to around about lap 15 there, where Sebastian pits around about lap 16, his trace drops down. That means he's pitting. What's happening there is he's moving further and further. Those lines are diverging. He's moving further and further away from Max. So he's not very happy. They eventually, around about lap 10, they let Charles past, and Charles is then on really good pace. You can see that his line, the dotted red line, moves towards the blue line of Max around about lap 15, 18 again. So the pace of the Ferrari in that stage of the race was very good. Both Max and Sebastian, they stop around about lap 18 there. The two traces come down. Charles runs on because he's going to now be on a different strategy. And you can see that around lap 22, 23, 24, they start making that decision to pit. So the dotted red line of Charles suddenly falls down the screen. That's him pitting, and he comes out right in front of Sebastian.
Yeah.
He puts the hard tyre on, and he's obviously going to be on a one-stop strategy there.
Okay, I mean, the dip between lap, 43 and 45, that's the safety car, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where Leclerc, what would have been the one-stop strategy on the hard tyre, they decided they might as well change it to a two-stop because you get more or less a free pit stop, don't you, under the safety car? All right, but if we bring in our strategy masterclass whiteboard here...
Love a whiteboard.
How would it have been different, potentially, if they'd have done something with Vettel earlier on? So, Seb, again, just like this, the solid red line.
Yeah, so Seb's the solid red line, as you say. And I think when you look at this is purely hindsight, and I'm sure that the Ferrari engineers have gone away and they're starting to look at this. But what you could have done, rather than letting these two lines diverge here, and you see Sebastian getting further away from Max, what they perhaps could have done is pitted much earlier. It's a non-optimised two-stop. That's fair enough, but we're trying to get Sebastian track position here. And if we could have got him track position, then perhaps, rather than bleed this amount of time away here, by pitting him slightly earlier, we put him on a slightly better strategy, and you can see that the time he made up to what he actually did.
Okay, and what about the one stop for Charles? I mean, that's all right. Or could he have actually gone longer in that first stint? Would his tyres have lasted until lap, I don't know, 30, something like that, half distance more or less?
Well, again, if you look at what Lewis Hamilton did, Lewis Hamilton was able to run on much longer. Charles went through a little bit of traffic here, so his lap times kind of tail off, as you can see. But if we were able to keep those lap times going in some kind of reasonable manner, and get him to around about anywhere between 30 to 35, and then make that stop, we could have then been in a better position where he didn't have to make that second stop under the safety car. Got him in front of Max, which is exactly what he did. But it's a slightly different race, and he's got better tyres at this point as well. I think that's the key point, Ted, is that he's got between 5 and 10 laps younger tyres, and that's going to hold off Max until the end of the race.
Okay, so yet again with Ferrari, it's a case of what could have been. It's possible in hindsight they might have finished ahead of Verstappen and on the Spain podium. But bigger picture, Rob, what can Ferrari do to turn this round now?
Well, you know, they're a great team. They've got some really, really good operators in that team, some fantastic, you know, engineering skills and engineering resource as well. You know, you should never write Ferrari off in any way, shape or form. There was some talk about, you know, whether or not the philosophy of the car is right. I think if you look at their car, from what we can glean from the analysis that we're starting to do now, is they've definitely got less downforce than the Ferrari, but they've got less drag as well. So their car is still a very aerodynamically efficient car, but it's perhaps just having that little bit less downforce. Is that affecting the tyre management? Certainly we saw in Sector 3 during the qualifying that they bled off a lot of lap time in that Sector 3, and that's really about tyre management. If you can keep the tyres alive until that third sector in Barcelona, there's a lot of lap time in there.
Yeah, okay, so they've got a little bit less downforce than the Mercedes, but let's not forget, all right, we might have had 5 Mercedes 1-2s so far, but in Bahrain, had it not been for the electrical problem, Leclerc would have won. Baku, had it not been for Leclerc's mistake in qualifying, he probably would have won. So it could be very small mistakes here, or technical problems, and we might not have these 5 1-2s that Mercedes have had. We could have had Ferrari could have 2 wins up to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. They could have easily had 2 wins, and they definitely had the legs on Mercedes. There was no way that Mercedes were dealing with Ferrari in Bahrain. Ferrari were the stronger team, and had it not been for those mechanical problems, as you say, you know, they would have won the race. And I think that, you know, the complexion of Baku would have been completely different without Charles. So you know, Toto Wolff has said it himself that the 4-1-2s up until last weekend, the 5-1-2s now are certainly serving to flatter Mercedes, and you know, Ferrari have just got to get back on track. They're a great team. They've got great engineering resource. They've got great leadership, and if they can do it and they can do it quickly, then we've got a championship fight on our hands.
Okay, time to answer some of your questions, and this one sent in on Twitter from Make Me Smile with the hashtag F1 Weekend Debrief, and he asks, would we ever limit the amount of money given to teams so that skill wins and not money? Well, this points interestingly towards, what are we calling it, budget cap, resource restriction,
yeah,
2021?
Very topical indeed, as you say. 2021, it's all part of the package that Formula One's trying to put together. So that's the direction we want to take. I mean, you've just got to be a little bit careful that it doesn't become artificial, that you're not getting, you know, the minnows at the back who are constantly beating the guys who are doing the better job at the front. But definitely bringing that gap that we've got at the minute that exists, if we can bring that together via budget caps, great.
Okay, we'll see how that goes. One thing that money can't buy is a winning trophy from a Grand Prix. And we saw a lovely gesture from Mercedes to a very ill young man, Harry Shaw. He sent Lewis Hamilton a good luck message on the morning of the race, and Lewis really credited the win to the inspiration he took from that. And this was beautiful, wasn't it? Mercedes sent one of the cars to Harry's front drive, and he's got the trophy.
And he's got the winner's trophy. It was a really, really kind gesture. It was a really slick gesture. You know, within the teams, we're always we're focused on the next race. We're focused on the next 2-3 races, and you know, the whole of the company is driven towards, you know, that winning mentality. So the Mercedes team to take a little bit of time out, you know, and you know, make this very, very slick, kind gesture. It shows what a great team they are.
Yep, and it obviously meant the world to Harry as well. Well, there was lots of good action throughout the field in Barcelona, and Rob, Lando Norris and Lance Stroll came together in a familiar accident black spot at turn 1. This from the 360-degree camera, I love these cameras, of the McLaren. How did you read this?
Well, he kind of, you know, he's getting a move on him there, and he gets up the inside into turn 2. He's got some of his car there. You know, Lance could have left him a little bit more room.
Could have left him quite a lot more room, actually.
He could have left him a little bit more room. I don't think he has to leave the door wide open, because he has to make it, you know, it's not his job to make it easy for Lando to pass.
True.
We see it a bit more from Lance's point of view, and you can see that Lance is predominantly in front. Lando has got some of his car in front, alongside Lance's car, and then it's just this bit here where they both come together. It's a racing incident. You know, Lando probably could have backed out of it. Lance could have left him a little bit more room, but there's the resultant. The resultant is that, you know, both of those guys who were charging hard, they're trying to get points on the board, and they're both out the race.
And then we saw a dramatic fire in the Formula 2 sprint race with Nobuhiro Matsushita's Carlin And this was off the start, Rob.
This is off the start coming into turn 4, turn 5 even, sorry, and you can see that it's spraying oil out the back there. There's bit, you know, getting lost out the back. I think there's probably something failed mechanically. You've got that really hot exhaust channel, you know, running down inside the bodywork, and when you're spraying oil onto the carbon bodywork, and it's losing the insulation layer that you can see coming out the back there, and all these bits coming out the back and peeling out, it's eventually going to catch on. It's eventually going to catch fire, and they're very difficult to put out.
Do you think this is going to mean a chassis change for Carlin?
Possibly, you know, but it will be all the electric looms down the back end there. I think the chassis is probably all right looking at the fire.
And what does Matsushita do? Is he looking for the fire marshals? Because there's one thing having a marshal with a fire extinguisher. It's quite another thing controlling an inferno like this.
Yeah, well, as you saw, I mean, there was actually a fire truck that turned up, you know, a water bowser that had to put it out, because that's a very difficult fire to put out, in fact. You've got an electrical fire at some point once the lube catches on, and a carbon fire.
Well, the Haas team went well in Barcelona, didn't they, Rob? Both cars in the points. Crucially, first points of the year for Romain Grosjean. This is from the restart. This is all a bit close.
Yeah, they do kind of get up a little bit close, don't they? There's a tiny bit of contact that you can see there from another angle. But as you said, you know, both cars in the points. That's the first time this year. They've done a good job. You know, they're worried about their race pace. You know, Kevin Magnussen's been fairly vocal about whether or not they've fixed their problems. I think they may have partially fixed their problems. You know, they're on the right path, and as a Formula One team, when you've got a big problem, if you can just get yourself in the right direction, that's a huge boon.
Is this a case of, as we ride with Grosjean, we can see how close it was. They do touch, takes the sidewall paint off the tyres of Magnussen's right rear, does Grosjean. But is this too close for comfort for Günther Steiner?
If I was Günther Steiner, that would certainly be too close for comfort for me. Yeah, that's teammates, and you know, you've got both cars in the points. That can very quickly evaporate to no cars in the points. So yeah, that's a little bit close.
Right, next stop for F1, the streets of Monaco.
It's race time in Monaco.
Monaco, the jewel in the crown. What's your form guide for Monte Carlo?
Well, it's a street circuit. It's Monaco. It's a fantastic event, you know. So there's a lot of things that can happen. But, you know, Mercedes are going to have a strong car there. But I think that, you know, knowing Ferrari as well as I do, they're going to be working very hard. You know, I've been there, you know, years past where we've come back from some disastrous years and come back with a really good package to gain mechanical grip. We haven't got to forget how good Charles Leclerc is round there. You know, he's won round there, and he's on street circuits in everything that he's ever driven. He was fantastic there last year in a Formula One car, so there's a good outside chance there.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Rob Smedley. That is the checkered flag for us. Join us after the Monaco Grand Prix to see if Rob's prediction of maybe a Ferrari comeback with Vettel or Charles Leclerc comes true. But for now, from all of us here, it's goodbye.